productivity is really a key, and to the dental office success. And that comes down to scheduling, skill. It comes down to your team flowing to the work. And this is where a dentist that has just purchased another practice might have a little bit of a challenge. You might be coming into a practice that's been successful for years, the debt's been paid off for years, making good money. They've been running one column and a half, maybe two columns, and now you're coming in with a loan that's got to be paid off, right? And you still want to maintain pay systems and rewards for your team. So you've got to improve the productivity. And assuming your brand and your marketing can bring in those patients, it's important to really orchestrate your schedule. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily going to start with you and your skill and speed. It's going to be a balance that you've got to determine between the chair side conversations with patients and the human side of that with having a throughput and staying on schedule. So we've had practices that have been that do really well on a 2-column schedule, but man, you get to the 3rd column and even a 4th chair over here with somebody in it, and they kind of fall apart. So the team has got to be able to flow to the work. They've got to be able to rise to the occasion, right? And the mechanics of setting up the op, tearing down the op, and all that just got to be in place.
What's going on, everybody? I'm John Stamper, and excited to have another conversation with Ken Mathys as we continue this Beyond the Operatory podcast, brought to you by the amazing team at Dental City and all things business of dentistry. If you did not get a chance to watch the first episode with Ken, he went over a lot of information for the younger dentists. So whether you're a dentist, that's still in school or you're out a couple of years, it was really great to get Ken's insights on, what to look for, what are your options, how to kind of look at the end in mind of what you want your career to be and work backwards. There definitely are so many options, right, for younger dentists now. We know there's a lot more challenges per se, but there are a lot of people in the industry that have been there, done that, and Ken talked about that. So I would encourage you, if you missed that first episode, to go back and watch. But as we go through this progression and look at the business of dentistry, this next episode, which is going to be a 2-part episode, is really built on purchasing a practice and the things to look for. And I think a great place for us to start is looking at the industry now in 2026. It's definitely a lot different, Ken, than it was in purchasing a practice in 2008 or even 1995.
Right.
There's a lot of different things. So maybe give us a little bit of industry context, and then I'm going to get into all the building blocks that go into thinking about purchasing a practice, and we'll start there.
Well, that sounds good. It is a different era right now in dentistry. Still a great era for dentistry. Businesses of every type at every level and every sector of dentistry are being run better. They have to be run better in terms of being a business. You've got increased insurance pressures. I've been in the business for 35 years now. When I started, reduced fee plans were just rearing their ugly head. Now there's predominance of those kind of dental benefit plans and so forth. The supply companies are running a tighter ship. Dentist offices are being rolled up by DSOs that have the much more of a business bent to them, a private equity-led business bent, which is good. Like many other industries, the dental lab industry went through this in, I would say, the 90s, where there was a cottage industry. Many labs doing the same things. Those got rolled up. That was a technology consolidation. Mm-hmm. But it's natural for industries to go through these things, and we're going through an evolution in dentistry right now, which requires dental practices to be operated better, more efficiently.
Yeah. So one of the things you talked about in your first episode were a lot of the different options that a dentist could have, right? Whether they were coming out of school or they're a younger dentist. Right. And I had some time to sit down with Betsy on some of the initial episodes on leadership. And we had a conversation when we finished that when we looked at the medical industry, when a lot of the medical practices, got rolled up into the larger medical groups, that was a while ago when that industry didn't have, in my opinion, the resources, the support that the dental industry does. And so, we talked about the benefits of a younger dentist going to work for a DSO and some of the positive things that would have you. And I think at first blush, as you know, Ken, a dentist who's looking to purchase a practice may look at the situation and say, oh, do private practices, is it still a viable thing to do? And you shared certainly some of the pluses of that.
Oh, absolutely.
And I do feel like there are a lot of resources now in dentistry that the medical industry did not have, that if you want to purchase a practice, I'm sharing this because a message of encouragement, right?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And I think having you here and having you kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what we want to try to accomplish is that if you do want to purchase a practice, we're going to get into that.
Right.
And so when you really think about a dental practice, and we're going to go through all of these, it's branded marketing, it's product line and depth and breadth, it's team and HR systems, production operations, revenue and expenses, location, facility and equipment, regulatory environment, general economic environment, legal contracts, managing liability, strengths and weaknesses in all of those areas. I mean, wow. Like, do you still want to do it?
I would say for the right person, it's a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah.
And fulfillment in terms of serving your patients and fulfillment in terms of being a leader of your organization, and certainly a fulfillment financially.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great option, but the dental practice is a business.
Yep.
And it's important for young dentists, especially dentists buying a practice, to understand it is a business, and they're going to have to devote time to understanding that. It's not just going to happen by itself.
Right.
If it happens by itself, it's not going to be where you want it. So that's really the key. Wear a lot of hats in the business. You're the brand manager, you're the production supervisor, you're the new product developer, you're the financial bank person, you're the HR manager, you're the recruiter. All those things that a normal business has, you're going to have in your practice.
So I know one of the reasons why this Beyond the Operatory podcast was important to Dental City is, if you know of Dental City, obviously they're providing supplies and support to a lot of dental practices across the country. And the reality is, as you know, Ken, is that from a Dental City perspective, if the practice is struggling financially and they're not running it like a business, it doesn't matter how much they could save on supplies.
Right.
And I know that's why it was so important for them to have you so that we can really break down each one of these areas, when
Sure.
someone's looking to purchase a practice. So let's start with brand and marketing. We're going to kind of go through this list and have you share some insights with your experience of working with practices for many years to kind of give some people some details on those. So let's start with kind of brand and marketing.
Sure.
And thinking about that.
Sure. Brand is really important. And brand is not what you put out there. It's not your logo. It's not what you say on a Facebook post or whatever. It's really what your patients, what the community thinks your brand is, what they feel. Okay. So everything you do in terms of how you present your practice, the look, the feel, the facility, the team, advertisements, posts, have got to project the brand that you want, but then you have to deliver. You really have to deliver. And if you don't deliver, your brand will not be sustained.
One of the things that Betsy and I talked about on one of the episodes was how dentistry has moved from being what was a reactive industry and profession to more of a proactive one. As you know, when you think back of your early days, patients would go when they were in pain, they would go to get their teeth cleaned. A lot of dental practices didn't have to think proactively about marketing, but that certainly has changed. And so I know you talk about brand and how they want their patients in their community, what they want them to associate themselves with. But talk a little bit about marketing as well and just the importance of it.
Once you determine the brand that you want, that you're going for, then you've got to do the proper marketing. And marketing is important nowadays because there seems to be much more competition.
Yeah.
Some of the larger chains have the marketing budgets. Right. They're going to get out there in front of people. And marketing is important to get that shot at a patient's first visit.
Right.
once they have a first visit, then it's your internal marketing that takes over your performance. So I think that's the key to understand is you have to do marketing. You have to establish your brand, well thought out brand, and you have to do the right kind of marketing. You have to reach the patients or potential patients, the type of potential patients that you want. Yeah. Market segmentation, if you will. Yeah. And target marketing is really part of that. General brand look and feel is part of that. But marketing is important for that reason, because it is more competitive out there. Yeah. To land that first patient. You didn't have that 20 years ago, 15 years ago even.
So on the lines of marketing, you have to know exactly what you're going to market. and that gets us to our next one, which is understanding your service line, right? Are you going to just be restorative? Are you going to do endodontics? Are you going to, what are you going to offer? And again, you and I talked about in our first episode that if you are going to purchase a practice, look at it as if you're an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur myself, I have learned over the years, you got to be careful with what services you decide to offer, because like you said, you have to deliver that. And so, can you talk a little bit about the importance of deciding what services you're going to offer and then making sure that you can deliver?
Yeah, it's really important to do what you do well, because some situations that go south on you are going to come back to bite you, and you really can't afford that. If you live in a town that has well-respected specialists, endodontists, oral surgeons, so forth, you may limit your service line to crown and bridge, dentures. If your practice is out in the country, you're probably going to look at a broader product line because they're not going to have access to specialists.
Right.
You're probably going to do endo and implants and possibly even orthodontics.
Right.
Right. The key is that whatever service line you select, you're held to the standard. What's the word I'm looking for? You're held to the
standard as if you did that
standard of care.
Standard of care. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
So the important thing is, whatever you select your service line to be, you're held to the standard of care of a specialist.
I think it's a good message because, again, I wanted to couple that together with looking at this through the lens of being an entrepreneur. Many entrepreneurs see a lot of things that they could do in the industry that they work in. And it can be very challenging to make a decision and draw a line in the sand and say, I'm going to do these two things because, like you said, it's what I know I can do really well. And in the case of dentistry, that benchmark, like you mentioned, is standard of care. Like you could put yourself in a situation where your eyes get a little bit bigger than your stomach, and you could end up offering a lot of services. And to your point, you may not be where you want to be. And if you're starting out early, it could hurt you.
Right. And I think one of the biggest risks to trying to take on too much is taking your eye off the ball. Yeah. It's easy to get enamored with the shiny, sparkly thing over here.
Right.
But what is your main business line? What really drives profitability? What really drives efficiency? What can you do well? And if you spend too much time going to seminars and trying things out, you're going to possibly take your eye off the ball.
All right, so the next thing is you build this brand, you start to market it, you decide what services you're going to offer, and then you look behind you, you're like, I need a team, right? And so there's the element, like we mentioned in the first episode, of maybe you're purchasing a practice where a team already exists, maybe not. But just when a dentist kind of gets their handle, Ken, on some of this business stuff, then they got to worry about the people things too, which I will remind everybody, we had a lot of great episodes with Betsy Mitchell where she was talking about leadership and managing. So I encourage you to go watch those. But in the context of what you're sharing with the business side, let's talk about that next thing, which is team, and then more importantly, like your HR systems.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges for dentists is leading, managing their team. And I don't want to get into too much of what Betsy probably got into, but the team is really what's going to make the practice. They have to be engaged. They have to be skilled. They have to be challenged. They have to be paid fairly, and that's really important. Probably one of the top priorities in as you get into your new practice is engaging the team and getting on the same page and really getting to know them. It's really important to be present with the team. It's important to connect on a personal level, but you can't get too much into their personal life.
Right.
And, but if they feel connected and valued, and if they know where they stand, they'll be a great team for you. And I think people mostly want to be paid fairly and know where they stand and have opportunities and be appreciated.
Yeah, those 4 things.
So that's really the key summary for a team. Now, you build around that, you build the HR systems involved with that. You build your review systems and your pay systems. And we'll get into that in more depth, I think, at another time. But those are really important to support that. Your feedback systems for your team members, to understand where the natural leaders are and to understand people's idiosyncrasies and to put people in the best position where they can be successful, I think is the main key.
Awesome. All right. So again, through this lens of running and operating a business, there's the production and the operations and the office systems. One of the things, I'm sure you experienced this in your career, I've sat in many continuing education courses with dentists and to their credit stood up the vulnerable ones and said, hey, like I am the bottleneck in this practice.
Mm-hmm.
I need to do a better job of building systems and things like that. So with the whole idea of framing out for someone that's looking to purchase a practice, talk a little bit about the importance of this checkbox as well, which is your production and your operating systems for your office.
Sure. I think productivity is really a key. And to the dental office success. And that comes down to scheduling, skill, it comes down to your team flowing to the work. And this is where a dentist that has just purchased another practice might have a little bit of a challenge. You might be coming into a practice that's been successful for years, the debt's been paid off for years, making good money. They've been running one column and a half, maybe two columns, and now you're coming in with a loan that's got to be paid off, right? And you still want to maintain pay systems and rewards for your team. So you've got to improve the productivity. And assuming your brand and your marketing can bring in those patients, it's important to really orchestrate your schedule. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily going to start with you and your skill and speed. It's going to be a balance that you've got to determine between the chair side conversations with patients and the human side of that with having a throughput and staying on schedule. So we've had practices that have been that do really well on a 2-column schedule, but man, you get to the 3rd column and even a 4th chair over here with somebody in it, and they kind of fall apart. So the team has got to be able to flow to the work. They've got to be able to rise to the occasion, right? And the mechanics of setting up the op, tearing down the op, and all that just got to be in place.
So in year 1, 2, 3, or 4, of dental school, I don't feel like, Ken, there is a lot of classes on revenue and expenses and assets and liabilities.
Right.
But if you make that decision to purchase a practice, that's another thing that you have listed here that's really super important for them to know and understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Balance sheets, and these terms are often misused by dentists, P&L, balance sheets, cash flow statements. So just a real thumbnail. A balance sheet is simply at a point in time, what are your assets, things you own? What are your liabilities, things you owe? And then the remaining ones, subtract the liabilities from your assets, and that's your net worth. So that's as a point in time. The profit and loss statement or the income statement deals with a period of time. For that period of time, how much did you produce? How much did you collect? What were your expenses? And what's the profit or loss during that period of time? That's probably the most basic concept.
I love it.
I want dentists
Simple.
to understand right off the bat.
Yeah.
And they haven't had those classes.
Yeah.
And In there is also cash flow concepts and depreciation, which is not important to deal with right now, but those are really the basics. And you've got to understand that because it's got to prove out in the end.
Yeah.
Right.
So another really important decision is the old famous location, location, location. When you're thinking
That's
about
right.
purchasing a practice.
Location is extremely important these days. If you're in, especially if you're in a metro area, a city, suburb, you've got to be on the traffic patterns because if people don't see you and know you're there, it's probably the best way to be seen, being on the main drag, right? It's a little more challenging if you're in a professional building where you have to rely, that's maybe set off the main drag a little bit. That's going to force you to rely more on external marketing for people to find you.
Yeah.
And referrals. Referrals are still the primary way to build a practice. Location's important. It's got to be easy in, easy out. People are busy these days. They're running all around. They've got to get in. They've got to get out. And so that would be the key. Really a big key to a practice.
Yeah. So I know a lot of these, as we're kind of going through this list, for most people that are listening or watching, it can, they can seem like, at least conceptually, like, oh yeah, of course we have to get to the right location. But I think what was really important about you putting this together is because it is a very nice, concise checklist. Each one of these, I mean, we're just really kind of getting on the high level of them, right? I mean, obviously, as you know, there's more details within each one of them, but I think the whole idea is for all of you to have this checklist of things to look about and kind of guide you on when you're looking at purchasing a practice. And this next one is the facility and the equipment and the importance of that.
Right. It's important for a few reasons. It's important for your brand, what people feel when they walk in. It's important that it does the job you want, that it's got the number of ops you want, a nice reception area. People feel good when they're there. And it's important to know as you look to purchasing a practice because you're going to be taking out a loan to buy the practice. Are you going to have the funds available to upgrade your equipment if you need to upgrade the facility, to give it a new look, a new fresh look? And is the equipment in good enough shape to last a while? Is it of recent enough technology that it's not obsolete from a technology standpoint? So it's important for operations, it's important for branding, but it's also important for budgeting your next expenses, your next investments, I should say, in the practice.
The next thing that maybe not always gets thought about is the regulatory environment when you're purchasing a practice. I'd love to get you, have you, share that, elaborate that a little more.
Well, I'm not a clinician, but it's important to stay up on the state regs.
Yeah.
Mainly. It's important to stay up on insurance regulations from the standpoint of how they impact the dental office, right? Regulations in the HR area are really important, perhaps the most important to stay on top of, or have a resource that can stay on top of people, of that for you, I should say. So just be aware of what's out there and read and ask your resources to keep you up to date on that. Read your state society newsletters and so forth.
As I go through this list and hearing you talk about these, I'm envisioning this spreadsheet with all of these on the left-hand side, and then on the top, maybe a good idea would be some resources, right, with each one of these.
Sure.
People that you can connect. Because, I mean, as you know so well, Ken, there are a lot of businesses and companies now that are helping dentists when they're looking to purchase a practice with a lot of this information. So just something to keep in mind there. Another thing to think about is the general economic environment, right, in that particular city or where you're going to purchase that practice, like what is going on in that particular area.
Yeah, that's vitally important, especially for small and medium-sized towns that rely on a major employer for that area. Here in Wisconsin, we're heavily paper-based in a lot of areas, and there's changes going on in that industry from time to time. It's been a pretty steady industry. But small towns can often rely on a major employer. And that's devastating if you lose that employer. You also are concerned about the general economy, interest rates, consumer confidence is a big thing.
Yeah.
Right now, if people are feeling good and they have the funds, they're going to invest in themselves, improving their smile, or
Right.
whether that's functional or cosmetic, and staying tuned to that will help you make good decisions.
The next one is every business owner's favorite 5-letter word, legal. And the things to think about when it comes to legal contracts and in purchasing a practice, and how important it is.
It really is. And you've got contracts in different areas of the practice. You've got your lease, if you have a lease. If you're leasing from somebody else, if you don't own the building.
Right.
That's really important to understand and get an expert to help you with that. In the HR area, legal is really critical. It's important to have a good labor attorney at your fingertips, meet with periodically, and look at your systems. Having a really good handbook, employee handbook, is critical, because many times you deal with a situation that's not covered in the handbook, and if it was, it'd be much easier for you.
Yeah.
So especially when it comes to termination and benefits. During COVID, there were so many rules and regulations coming out and programs in the HR area that it was really important to have a good labor attorney. So, and God forbid if you ever had any practice issues where somebody wasn't happy with their practice, or you had a case that went bad, of course, you might have some legal issues with that. I don't see that very often at all.
Yeah. Great checklist. And again, like we mentioned, I think it's important to do that. And I think with each one of those areas, I know you kind of did high level, like you were talking about, trust but verify, make sure you do a deep dive, like make sure that you kind of look at all the options in those areas. And any kind of thoughts, any final thoughts on that list, and then we'll kind of get into some of the next areas.
Well, I think the key is having a great team around you.
Yeah.
And that's a practice advisor. It's a good tax accountant. It's a banker that you stay in touch with that knows your practice and isn't surprised when you might have a need. And of course, it's legal as well.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So as we kind of move on with this topic in purchasing a practice, you mentioned to me, we were talking about this, is, what you see is not always what you get. And so there's always two sides to a purchase, right? There's the buyer and the seller. And so I'd love to get your insight with your years of experience just on that statement alone.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway in that area is that when you look at somebody's P&L, a doctor's profit and loss statement, their trends, that is a scenario with a practice model that's worked for them. And that might not be the model that you operate with. You're going to come in with different needs, student loan debt probably, or possibly left over, practice acquisition debt. And so while an uninformed person would look at the P&L stream and see a profit flow, a nice profit flow, you have no idea what's behind that. You have no idea about the service line. You have no idea about how it's delivered, productivity. And so that's why what you see is not what you always get. And then even in initial conversations with the selling dentist, for example, you might get one idea that everything is rosy.
Yeah.
And everything comes easy. And the team is great. And chances are that's true, but chances are even that current owner, the dentist, doesn't know as much about his or her own practice as they really should.
Right.
And so that's why what you see is not always what you get. And it's important to do your research and do your due diligence.
Yeah, in the first episode, you talked a lot about, which I think is a great thing for anybody listening to this and watching this to think about, which is thinking about the end in mind, right? There are could be a lot of messy things when purchasing a practice. However, if you've taken the time, like you mentioned, to really sit down and know, listen, like I'm in this for the long haul. This is going to be my career.
Right.
I'm going to build and grow this. Then safe to say, Ken, that it makes this due diligence process a little bit more clear, right? Because you're not going in with blind eyes of like wanting to kind of like purchase something and flip it right away. Like it's an investment, but
It's a huge investment
Yeah.
to do it right.
Yeah.
And you do it for two reasons. One decision impacted by due diligence is go, no go. Are you going to buy the practice? But most of the time, the huge benefit of due diligence is to understand what the present state of that practice is versus the future state of where you want to take it. And what's that gap? And to understand the things you're going to have to do. You mentioned you're in for the long term. I think that's really great advice, because it's easy to knee jerk and make changes quickly without bringing your team along at a pace where they can do it well and they feel confident in that. So due diligence is important for those two reasons.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that you talked about is is it turnkey or is it more of a project? And,
Right.
I mean, obviously purchasing a dental practice there's some similarities in purchasing a home, but there are some differences in the operational part and the team and things like that obviously you don't have when you do a home. But I think a home is, there's kind of the same thing, right?
I think it's a great analogy.
Yeah. Some people like projects.
It is. And that also impacts, I should mention too, it also impacts what you're willing to pay for that practice.
Right.
You can use the basic benchmarks or whatever in coming up with a price. But if it is a project, you're going to have to build that into your future cash flow model.
Yeah.
And there are going to be things. I mean, you just have to go into it thinking there are going to be things that I'm going to have to work on here. Well, most of them I'll know from the due diligence process, but you're going to get surprised.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
So you just have to take it in stride, not overreact one way or the other, but don't assume everything is perfect.
Right. And that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to get your thoughts on, is that when you look at from your experience and the work that you've done in this area, map out just some high level things of what a successful due diligence process looks like.
Well, it's a successful due diligence process. The end goal of that is to give you a high degree of confidence that you're making the right decision. In the due diligence process, you're going to have a readiness assessment. You're going to do the number crunching. You're going to look at what investment is going to be needed. You're going to take a close look at the team. You're going to take a close look at all those aspects that we just discussed earlier of the practice. And so those are the main components. Let's just talk about readiness for the moment. One of the things that I've run into more than one occasion when a young dentist looks at buying a practice is that the selling dentist is really not ready. This has complicated matters quite a bit for a few of my clients over the years. Or they'll go to work as an associate with the idea of buying the practice within a short period of time. Well, then the equity markets fall apart and the dentist gets cold feet. And at the same time, the dentist isn't funneling dentistry to you like you expected. So that's all not happening. And because it's very difficult to put the intention of a associate with the option to buy into a contract, it can be done, but it's very challenging to make that work. You have to really have a good feel that the senior dentist is ready. It's much better in a case like that to buy the practice, keep the senior dentist or the selling dentist on for a while than it is to go to work for a doc and hope that things are going to work out. Because a lot of times they don't. I'd say about half the time, in my experience, they don't work out that well.
Well, and I think a lot of the things that you share are these kind of bare bones building blocks of the checklist and what to look for. I love that we've ended on this readiness piece because it's probably something, as you've shared from your experience, that can tend to get overlooked.
Yep.
Because the assumption is that someone, if they kind of make that early decision that they're going to sell, but there's the emotional part of this. And that was kind of the last thing I wanted to ask you here is
Huge.
that like, yeah, emotion. Like you shared a lot of tactics and like checklist things, many of which rightfully so don't deal with the emotional part. But what have you seen over the years of how important it is for someone that's going to purchase a practice to have, turn on that emotional intelligence button to make sure that they really kind of get a feel of the emotion of this whole situation?
That's a great point, and it's critical. Imagine being a dentist who's owned a practice for 34 years, knows all the patients personally from being in town, knows the staff very well, probably a longtime staff. Saying goodbye and moving on from that, even though they've known it's going to happen for years, is very, very difficult. Very difficult. The other aspect of that, from the staff's point of view, is they're going to be very skeptical. They're going to be afraid. They're going to have fear. Are they going to stay with you as you purchase the practice? How's that going to work? That's something we didn't talk about before in terms of readiness, but the team's got to be ready as well. And the emotion on your side, you've been anticipating this for years. You've negotiated it. You've prepared yourself. You're ready. And all of a sudden you're ready. And maybe the rest of the team isn't. So having your antenna up, like you said, is really important on that. And being sensitive to that. And understanding it and validating those feelings, doing checks and everything that will help the other people involved, the seller and the team, know that you're tuned into that. Part of what we talked about a little bit before. You've got to be tuned in to people on that side.
This has been a great kind of part one of this, purchasing a practice. And in the next episode, we're going to get into part two, where I know you're going to get into a little bit more detail around the diligence that's needed, people, revenue, brand, like each one of those high level items that you talked about, which are important just to conceptually think about what you need to make sure that you do your research on. Then you have to get into those each individually. And I know you're going to do that in this next episode, which I'm looking forward to. Good. Thank you for this one. I think it's super valuable, and want to let everybody know that if this is something that's been valuable to you, would love to have you subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, and of course, if you listen to this on Spotify or Apple, same thing. And then each time that we upload a new episode for this Beyond the Operatory podcast, it will come through automatically on your listening device of choice. So Ken, we'll look to you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.